A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for being a part of another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is so good to have you on board with us. Unlike the guest that I had lined up today, who, in all honesty, can't get a hold of. So I don't know. Hopefully our guest is all right. Love to have that guest back in the future. Not going to publicly name and shame the guest who didn't show up because there's probably a good reason why. But hopefully we'll be able to talk to that fascinating guest at some point in the future. In the meantime, we do have some fascinating news to talk about today, including this story from the New York Post. I guess it's based on a CNBC story. Michael Bloomberg is weighing a late entry into the 2020 presidential field here. Yeah, because he's worried about Joe Biden stumbling. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure what on earth Michael Bloomberg is even thinking about here. I mean, you've got the most let's put it this way. I do know what Michael Bloomberg is thinking about here, and it has, surprisingly enough, nothing to do with gun control. This is the most anti-gun crop of candidates in history, in U.S. history. You've never had a field of one major political party that is as anti-gun and as anti-Second Amendment as the one we have now. Virtually every candidate out there is supportive of a ban on the most commonly sold rifle in America today. They disagree about whether or not there should be a mandatory compensated confiscation program, but they all agree that these guns should be banned. That's about half the field says that there needs to be some sort of federal gun license. You've also got plans by folks like Elizabeth Warren to raise taxes on guns and ammunition by 30% or more. You've got Beto O'Rourke and you got Cory Booker calling for a quote unquote micro-stamping law. You have Beto O'Rourke with his, hell yeah, we're taking your AR-15s. Even Amy Klobuchar, who's been out there trying to present this moderate face of, I just, I think about my Uncle Dick in a deer stand. Even she has the most anti-gun platform compared to, even just a few years ago, somebody like a Barack Obama. So if Bloomberg's big concern is gun control, well, he wouldn't need to hop in just because Joe Biden is sinking right now and Elizabeth Warren is climbing. As a matter of fact, he should be happy. Joe Biden has talked about, it doesn't make sense to have a national gun license. We should just, let the states have their own gun licenses. And he has said, it doesn't make any sense to have a quote unquote buyback of these assault weapons. He's gone after Kamala Harris for saying, you can't do all this stuff via executive action. Not that Joe Biden is pro-gun by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, one of his proposals, I think, is as anti-gun as anything else we've heard from other candidates. He wants to end or ban any sort of online sales of firearms or ammunition, including those that I guess would go through a FFL and a background check. I mean, it's crazy. But apparently, Michael Bloomberg is concerned that Biden's not doing well, and that is prompting some consideration to get in the race. So what's going on here? Well, it's all about Elizabeth Warren, I think. And Elizabeth Warren, who has gone after Wall Street, has made Wall Street one of her villains, right? Well, what is Bloomberg's background? It's on Wall Street, right? So I think that is really what is triggering this. Now, according to this report by CNBC, some of Bloomberg's friends, including Judge Judy, of all people, say that Bloomberg would be a, quote, perfect presidential candidate. Yeah. New York Post reports a Bloomberg run is premised on Biden withdrawing from the race, however, sources told the outlet, and that is unlikely, at least through the early voting contests. A Bloomberg spokesman had no immediate comment. Longtime Bloomberg insider told the Post that the Mogul's campaign network has not been reactivated to prepare for a White House run. The source said that the CNBC story was the first that he had heard about this. So it could be that this is nothing more than rumors. I really would be shocked if Bloomberg got into the race. I just don't. I don't see a path to victory for him running as an independent or running as a Democrat. Bloomberg is not who Democrats are looking for right now. And as a matter of fact, I think that Biden is not necessarily who Democrats are looking for right now, which is part of Biden's problem. You've got a base that is as far left as it has ever been, and a base that is, I think in many cases, much more interested in revolution than in reform of the existing system. So I don't see that Bloomberg has a lot of traction among those Democrat primary voters. Even if Biden were to drop out, I don't think that they would naturally gravitate to Michael Bloomberg if he got into the race. And frankly, Michael Bloomberg is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars next year, whether he's a candidate or not, promoting candidates who will push for things like gun control, as well as I'm sure soda bans and vaping bans and anything else you can think of banning. Those are the candidates that Bloomberg will back. I just don't see an upside for him if he were to get into the presidential race. So I see this as a rumor. I don't think it's going to happen. But it does show that I think Bloomberg is thinking about a little bit more than gun control when it comes to this presidential nomination. He's also thinking about his buddies there on Wall Street, as well as perhaps himself, too. All right. So normally this would be, again, where we have our interview. Unfortunately, we won't have that today. Maybe we'll double up tomorrow. But I tell you what we can do. We can get to what we also do on a daily basis here on this program, and that is give you some of the other big stories from around the country. So speaking of people who will not be president, Beto O'Rourke is out. You like that? Is out with he's not out with a story. Politico is out with a big profile of Beto O'Rourke, and they're wondering, not is he going to be president, because I think the answer is no. Is he hurting the gun control crusade? Now, we've obviously heard folks like Delaware Senator Chris Coons say, Beto O'Rourke threw a monkey wrench in the whole talks that we were having over gun control. This Politico story gets even a little bit deeper than just that, and explores whether or not Beto O'Rourke is actually getting out ahead of where even gun control groups are. And it's interesting because not one gun control advocate who was quoted in that Politico story says anything bad about Beto. I mean, you're not going to do that. Instead, they talk about, listen, the American people are here. They're ready for this. They talk about a new poll in Texas even showing, I think it was something like 47% of respondents say, we're ready for that ban on the most commonly sold rifle in America today and the compensated confiscation of said firearms. I would caution all of these gun control advocates and all of the supporters here not to buy into what the polls are saying. Because, there's so much that is not said in a poll question. Do you want to ban these guns? Well, I imagine if you don't own one of these guns, sure. You've been hearing a lot of awful things about them in the news. Why not ban these guns? We should probably take them away from people too, right? Yeah, I think we probably should. This doesn't get into the constitutional considerations, but nor does it get into the practical considerations. If the poll were conducted in such a way, so let's say, now Beto says in this Politico story that he's still backing fines for individuals who don't hand over their firearms, but he says he's willing to explore the idea of prison time if you don't turn in your gun. So imagine if the question were posed this way. Do you think Americans should go to prison if they own an AR-15? What percentage of the population would say, yes, I am on board with that? If you told them 10 million Americans, 15 million Americans own one of these banned firearms, do you think they should go to prison if they don't turn their gun in? What would the percentage be that said, yeah, I think we should imprison 8 million people? I think it's probably going to be a lot less than 50%. I would hope it'd be a lot less than 50%. Right now, by the way, we have less than 30,000 individuals in federal prison on weapons charges of any kind. And what Beto O'Rourke is proposing is to criminalize millions of Americans who right now are legal law-abiding gun owners. O'Rourke, by the way, says that if he does not get the presidential nomination, and he's not going to get the presidential nomination. He says he really can't see running for another office. Sure. Okay. Whatever. It may be that he is, got designs on running one of the big gun control groups, or maybe even starting another gun control group of his own, because, that's what we don't have enough of right now is gun control groups out there. But if you get the opportunity, take a look at that Politico profile of Beto O'Rourke. Also, if you get the opportunity, go to bearingarms.com and take a look at this story that I published last night. System failure. Seattle's criminal justice system is broken. So this is fascinating. Nationwide, FBI says that violent crime dropped across the United States between 2017 and 2018. That was not the case in Seattle, where violent crime was up by about 2%. And the real concern, I think, is that violent crime is actually up more than that. It's just that people are no longer reporting some of these violent crimes to police because nothing ever happens. So 3 business associations in Seattle, one, I think, in the downtown area, and then a couple of other neighborhoods around downtown, commissioned this report. This is actually the second report that's come out. The first one talked about repeat offenders in Seattle and how and again, how you can have somebody with 100 arrests to their name, but they still get slaps on the wrist and they're still sent on their merry way. They're caught in this revolving door of justice. The second report that came out late last week talks about the city side of things, not the criminals, but what's the city doing that is perhaps exacerbating this problem. What they found is that almost half the time, the city attorney in Seattle is not prosecuting misdemeanor offenses. Police will go out, they'll make an arrest, they'll build a case, they'll present the charges to the city attorney, and the city attorney doesn't do anything with them. And as a result, again, you've got people getting away with assaults. You've got people getting away with shoplifting. In fact, this report talked about one grocery store in the downtown Seattle area that has simply stopped calling the police when somebody shoplifts. Because most of the time when they would call the police would come out and they'd say, well, it's less than $25. We don't really investigate for that. So in Seattle, by the way, right now, it appears as if you steal something, as long as it's worth less than $25, it's yours. There's nothing that's going to happen to you. The police won't even pursue a case. Now, if it's over $25, maybe the police will pursue a case. But then again, you got to get the city attorney involved. And it looked like it was something like, 15 or 20% of the time that somebody actually stole something of value from this grocery store, the law would get involved. That was it. And so they quit contacting the police because what's the point? So now they've got thousands of dollars in merchandise going out the door every month, and they're not even bothering to report any of those crimes to police. Well, that's going to skew the crime stats. There was another incident that the report talked about, an individual who was assaulted in downtown Seattle. Took 7 months for the city attorney to bring charges, and in the meantime, this guy had gone on to allegedly commit other assaults instead of being behind bars and having a case against him pursued. It was like pulling teeth, apparently, to get the city attorney to go after this guy. When you are light on offenders, and at the same time, by the way, Washington State has passed a number of bills dealing with, and referendums dealing with legal gun owners. When you are light on criminals and you are cracking down on legal gun owners, guess what's going to happen? Your crime rate is going to go up. And we have seen this in Seattle. We have seen this in Denver. We have seen this in Baltimore, Maryland. And unfortunately, I worry that we're going to see this come into more cities because this seems to be the modus operandi of these deep blue cities these days. Go light on the offenders, even the most prolific offenders, but crack down on anybody trying to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Speaking of that, okay, so we've got an update for you on a story that we reported on yesterday. This 84-year-old Stephen Nichols, who lives on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. He's a military veteran, served in the Korean War. He was a law enforcement officer for decades. He's a crossing guard now, or at least he was, and I guess he will be again. But he had his firearm seized from him after he was at a local diner there on Martha's Vineyard, was having a conversation, and he was bitching. He was bitching about the school resource officer there in their town school. He's complaining that the guy goes off and gets coffee every morning once the kids are in school. Now, by the way, the police chief says nobody's ever complained about this school resource officer. We've not had any complaints. We stand by him. But this was the context of the conversation. Stephen Nichols is talking to somebody else at the diner. He says, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but this guy goes off. Somebody could shoot up the school because he's not there. Well, a waitress apparently heard that and viewed that as a threat, contacted the police department. They came out while he was serving as a crossing guard, relieved him of his duties, and then said, you got to give us your guns. Now, there was no formal revocation. Apparently, there's not a formal revocation here in Massachusetts because the chief is the issuing authority. Your local police chief decides whether or not you get to exercise your right to keep and bear arms. The chief just said, well, go take his guns. So they took his guns. They gave them to his son-in-law. And yesterday afternoon, a couple of hours after we actually first reported this story, the chief issued a statement saying Stephen Nichols is coming back as a crossing guard. We've heard from a lot of folks in the community. They're very upset about what happened. He is going to be returning as a crossing guard. Nothing was said about his guns that were taken. Nothing. So the good news is that Stephen Nichols does have an attorney. They are appealing this. And I in a perfect world, not only would he get his guns back, they would rename the town. It would be Stevens Vineyard. The whole island would be renamed after him because he would have sued that local government into oblivion for infringing on his right to keep and bear arms. Unfortunately, again, this is Massachusetts that we're talking about, so the government's kind of allowed to. The government in Massachusetts does not see your right to keep and bear arms as a right. The laws in Massachusetts have not been rewritten since the Heller decision. And the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts ruled back in 1976 that there was no individual right to keep and bear arms. So every law in the state of Massachusetts, even those that have been put on the books post-Heller, still is written with the assumption that you don't have a right. You get a permission slip from the government. It is a privilege to own a gun. It is a privilege to carry a gun. And that's the way they view the Second Amendment in Massachusetts. Until that changes, I think it's still going to be Martha's Vineyard. Hopefully, Stephen Nichols is going to get his guns back very quickly, but I don't think he's going to have a multi-million-dollar payday for having his rights infringed upon. Although, I'm knocking on wood, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that happens. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and unfortunately, another story from our failed criminal justice system. Yep, I think this one is a matter of time as well, although the recidivism report could apply as well. To this gentleman, Dale Holloway. He's 37 years of age. He's got a really unfortunate tattoo on his head there. He is accused now of attempted murder. You may have seen the headlines of this story. Guy walks into a church in Pelham, New Hampshire over the weekend, opens fire. Thankfully, nobody was killed. As it turns out, Holloway's the man police suspect did all of this, and he is no stranger to the law. The Lowell Sun reports back in 2012, he faced a number of very serious allegations, was actually convicted of 2 counts of assault and battery, as well as holding somebody against their will, but was acquitted of rape in that attack. That's when he was a resident of South Weymouth, Massachusetts. He's got domestic violence incidents going back to 2009, including the rape and impregnation of a woman with their second child. Despite, again, that lengthy criminal history there in Massachusetts, Holloway apparently didn't spend much time behind bars because he was out, illegally obtained a firearm, and again, opened fire in that New Hampshire church, now facing the most serious charges of his life. Now, our armed citizen story of the day from East Texas, Smith County, Texas, Flint, Texas, the specific town there where a homeowner ended up shooting a burglar. Actually, 2 homeowners ended up shooting a burglar who tried to run them over with a stolen car. It happened around midnight on Saturday. Homeowner saw headlights near his driveway where really no headlights should be. He kind of looked outside, saw a couple of guys, actually I think 3 guys, scoping out his vehicle. So he did something that I wouldn't recommend you do. He fired 3 warning shots into the air. Now, what goes up must come down, and so you fire bullets up in the air, they're going to come down somewhere. So not the safest thing in the world to do. He's not facing any charges for it, but I would not recommend firing quote unquote warning shots. Anyway, after those shots were fired, the three ended up taking off. They drove away, but they drove the wrong way down a dead end street. So they had to turn around and come back. At that point, the homeowner's neighbor had come outside armed with a shotgun, and they're there in the road as this car starts barreling down towards them. Lights off. They both fire. The driver, a 17-year-old, was struck. Two other suspects ended up bailing and running. So far, they have not been caught by police. The homeowner not facing any charges. We'll try to bring you more details of that story as they become available. And finally, we've got a good deed for you from, I believe this is pronounced Eddyville, North Carolina, where a family, that by the way is Captain Tim Griffin with the local sheriff's office. And it was not long ago in Eddyville when a family lost everything that they own when their RV went up in flames. They lost everything. Thankfully, they did not lose any lives, but all of their possessions were gone. And for a 6-year-old named Damon, that meant that his Halloween costume was gone. So the sheriff's captain, Captain Griffin, decided he was going to try to do something special for this young man. At least, do something. I mean, gosh, your life has just been turned upside down at that point, right? So he decided, you know what, I can't make everything better, but what I can do is I can make sure that this kid has a Halloween costume. So he presented a Batman costume to Damon, told him that the sheriff's department is always looking for a few good superheroes. They need all the Batmen that they can get. Damon, absolutely thrilled, and just a small slice of normalcy returned to that family who is dealing with an incredible loss. So Captain Griffith there in the Sheriff's Department in Eddyville, North Carolina, we thank you for being in the right place at the right time and willing and able to help make a young kid's Halloween what it should be. We thank you, sir, for your good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I do appreciate you being a part of the program each and every day. You can subscribe if you are hunting around trying to find us each and every day. You don't have to do that. You can subscribe to Apple Podcast. You can subscribe to, where else are we? Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com podcast as well. And of course, you can also subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. You'll not only get Bearing Arms Cam & Company each and every day, but all of the other great content that Town Hall Media is putting up there as well. That's going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Thanks again for being a part of the program. We will talk to you tomorrow with another edition of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation.